20,000 men, women, and children, bodies skewered on stakes, swaying like a forest of the dead, the smell of rot in the wheat, the sound of crows teaching their young to feast. He made terror visible, measurable, countable from a hilltop. They called him Vlad the Impaler, a prince who ruled through cruelty and precision, who turned punishment into architecture. His name walked ahead of him like a shadow and entered rooms before he did. But a man who builds his throne from bones never sits safely. The world watched. The wolves gathered. And the same hands that lifted him up learned how to let him fall. All the blood he spilled could not buy the one thing he needed most at the end: someone to stand beside him when the knives came. This is not just the story of a monster. It is the story of what monsters fear. He was born into fire. Wallachia was no kingdom. It was a wound. Armies from east and west trampled its soil until the rivers ran brown with blood. Villages were ash, and children learned the taste of smoke before the taste of bread. In this wasteland, Vlad opened his eyes. His lullabies were the screams of raided towns, his toys, the bones scattered after battle. From the start, the world told him one thing: mercy is extinction. His father ruled not as a king, but as a man clinging to a cliff edge, one hand gripping Hungary, the other the Ottoman Turks. Above him, betrayal. Below him, rebellion. And his children were pawns in every bargain. For most boys, childhood is memory. For Vlad, it was apprenticeship, an apprenticeship to cruelty, treachery, and iron. He learned young that fear feeds faster than bread. And in the shadows of his youth, the thought first whispered, "One day I will not run from monsters. I will become one." At 11, his name was written on a treaty and his body delivered to the enemy. The Ottoman court received him with silks that felt like ropes. He learned the schedule of executions by the pattern of footsteps outside his door. He counted the cracks in the courtyard stone, where blood dried darker. He watched faces master the art of survival, eyes lowered, voices soft, minds calculating. His brother Radu adapted, smiles, manners, fluent charm. Vlad did not. He studied pain, like scripture, duration, spectacle, audience. He learned that terror, correctly applied, is the cheapest army in the world. Humiliation did not bend him, it annealed him. He came out of the forge colder than he entered, carrying a blueprint no teacher gave him. To rule, you must choose methods that people remember with their stomachs, not their minds. Every night he rehearsed a vow the walls could not hear. "I will return what you taught me, interest compounded, payable in screams." His father was Dracula, the dragon, sworn to a holy order meant to defend the border of Christendom. Titles are supposed to protect children. In Wallachia, they paint targets on them. Dracula, they called him, son of the dragon. A name like a banner, but it felt like an omen. He wore it the way a soldier wears armor, heavy, loud, and increasingly necessary. He returned from captivity with a stranger's composure. Servants avoided his eyes because they did not find a boy there. They found a calculation. He did not pray for justice. He engineered outcomes. He did not ask for loyalty. He designed fear. Affection can be betrayed in a moment. Respect can erode in a year. But fear renews itself every sunrise. When he spoke of the throne, he did not say "my right." He said, "my experiment." Wallachia greeted him with a knife behind its back. Boyars bowed and measured his height for a coffin in the same motion. The land was split by bribes and oaths that expired at sunset. Hungary tugged at one arm, the Sultan at the other, and the people, always the people, paid. Vlad walked through corridors where his father's murder still echoed. He ran his palm along the stones and felt how quickly loyalty cools when the torch passes. In taverns, men spoke softly about changing winds. In churches, priests thanked God for peace and asked forgiveness for the price of it. He learned the only law that seemed to work here: if fear is not present, something else will volunteer: greed, treason, or both. He took the throne like a man catching a falling blade, victory in the hand, blood on the wrist. For days, banners flew. For days, men shouted his name. Then, as if on cue, the floor dropped out. Allies reconsidered, gold changed pockets, doors refused to open. He rode away unthroned and unwept. Exile is a teacher who charges full price, but gives the lesson clearly. Next time, do not arrive with promises. Arrive with consequences. In the quiet afterward, he trimmed his ambitions into something sharper. He would not ask to be obeyed. He would build a world where disobedience felt like a physical illness. When he whispered, "I'll return," it didn't sound like hope. It sounded like architecture. When he came back as policy. The laws wore wood and iron. He ordered stakes cut to calculated heights, low for the petty, high for the powerful, so that even in death, the hierarchy taught a lesson. Angles were chosen to prolong agony without mercy and without chance. Executioners became craftsmen, roads became galleries, justice became visible from a mile away. People learned to live by a new clock, the slow public hour of dying. Mothers covered children's eyes too late, and the lesson entered by another door. Vlad watched the first week unfold with the stillness of a mathematician. The line between cruelty and order thinned until it looked like a single thread, and he pulled it tight. The Ottomans marched expecting forts and found choreography. Before Targovishte, 20,000 bodies lifted their accusations to the sky. The wind played the stakes like instruments out of tune. Veterans who had stepped over plague pits and winter graves went pale. A soldier can ignore danger. He cannot ignore prophecy. And this looked like a prophecy carved from flesh. Command snapped. Morale cracked. Superstition took command. Columns slowed, not because of resistance, but because the body resists what the mind cannot classify. The invaders pulled back with their feet, while their eyes remained fixed. Vlad had discovered a weapon that required no supply lines, the imagination of his enemy. He turned his blade inward. Thieves found their hands missing, and their bodies mounted as signage. Corrupt merchants measured their profits against the height of a stake and miscalculated. Boyars who built conspiracies discovered that foundations set in fear crumble under a heavier fear. For a season, roads were safe and doors slept open. The poor called it justice because night finally ended before morning. But justice bought with bloodstains the buyer as well. The land learned the habit of flinching. Children hesitated at laughter, as if someone might take it away for a crime they hadn't committed yet. Vlad called it order. Others called it breathing with a knife to the throat. He knew theater when he saw it, and when he staged it. Tables set within sight of stakes, silver shining with a reflection that trembled when the breeze moved. He carved bread while men gasped, lifted goblets while flies changed ownership. Guests learned to master the art of swallowing revulsion. "Does this offend you?" he'd ask softly. Offense in his country could be fatal. Stories traveled faster than riders. The prince who ate where others fainted, the man who preferred witnesses to mercy. He wasn't merely cruel. He was curating his reputation like a museum no one could leave without understanding the collection. To peasants, he was two men, the butcher who punished breath, and the prince who finally made wolves walk in daylight without teeth. Markets reopened. Coin changed hands without a guard watching both palms, and for once the night ended when the sun asked it to. Even so, memory kept a ledger the present could not erase. Families marked anniversaries not by weddings, but by the day someone didn't come home. Vlad did not court love. He built a world where love was a luxury too expensive to buy and too fragile to display. And still, his name grew, because terror is the only rumor that never needs help spreading. The Sultan read reports that smelled of rot. The king read letters that shook with the hand that wrote them. Hungary saw a fire it could not own. The Ottomans saw a thorn that grew deeper with every attempt to pluck it. The Boyars saw yesterday and assumed it would be safer if tomorrow resembled it. He was too Christian for the Sultan, too disobedient for the king, too independent for the nobles. Hatred rarely unites enemies for long. Fear does it in a heartbeat. The circle tightened. Vlad smiled without joy and ordered more wood. Betrayal travels lighter than armies. One evening, the gates didn't open. One morning, a messenger didn't arrive. One week, an ally forgot how to write his name on a promise. He rode away through fields that looked relieved to see him go. The birds did not change their song. Only men do that. Hungarian chains fitted as if tailored. Prison doors closed with the soft authority of inevitability. In the quiet, he inventoried debts, names, places, gestures, glances. He did not plan mercy for any of them. Prisons cannot contain a story. In confinement, his legend multiplied like mold in the damp. He learned the patience of stone and the attention span of wolves. Guards avoided his eyes. Some men fear knives. Others fear the memory of the man who once held them. Whispers about him crossed borders, wrapped in parchment and panic. The Impaler, tamed for now, dangerous later, became a cautionary tale that politicians passed like a hot coal. He slept little. He measured nights by the number of times he woke hearing footsteps and prepared to smile at the man who didn't come. When the door finally opened for real, he stood the way a paused sentence resumes. Hungary needed a monster with the right enemies. Necessity visits pride and eats whatever is on the table. They loosed him like a tool taken off a hook. Familiar, risky, useful for a specific job. He promised what he had always promised: safety through severity, order through blood. The pitch hadn't aged. The buyer had. Wallachia sighed like a widow, remarried to a man she recognizes all too well. For a moment, the machine turned as designed. For a moment. But climates change, even in politics. The Boyars had learned secrecy. Soldiers had learned options. Neighbors had learned how to look away at the right time. He tried to rule yesterday's way and found the gears grinding. Fear to function must always feel new. He saw hesitation in men who used to snap to attention. He heard courtesy like a veil thrown over a loaded cart. He tightened, they loosened. He threatened, they calculated. The old equation no longer balanced. A winter draft crept under the door. He put more wood on the fire and called it strategy. The Ottomans pressed again, as if time were a circle. Vlad gathered banners and spoke of lines to be held, as if maps could scare men. He rode at the front because he trusted no one's back. Snow in the air, iron in the lungs. In the camp, oaths were exchanged without eye contact. Men swore with one hand and held a different future with the other. He sharpened his sword as if the steel could hear. He told it the story of victory, the way one tells a child a bedtime tale. But all the while, the bed was being pulled away. It began not with thunder, but with absence. Horns that should have called the charge blew too late. Torches that should have burned bright flickered low. Messengers arrived with maps that bent roads the wrong way. The enemy was not in front. It was all around. Dust rose where allies should have stood. Men looked over their shoulders and saw not friends, but emptiness. The line of battle trembled, blurred, and dissolved into rumor. Vlad rode among them like a man stranded in his own army. He cut a circle of corpses around himself, each swing a refusal to concede, each scream an accusation hurled at the men slipping away. He shouted the names of captains who pretended not to hear. He shouted the name of Wallachia itself, and only the wind answered back. This was not defeat by steel. It was defeat by subtraction. Betrayal doesn't stab. It simply steps aside and lets the knives in. And Vlad found himself standing alone in the middle of a silence too heavy to survive. No chronicler agrees on the exact moment of his fall, but all agree on its taste. Iron in the mouth, dirt in the lungs, silence all around. He fought as if the ledger of his life was still unfinished. Every stroke of his blade was a desperate sentence added to a history already overflowing with blood. But exhaustion is a kind of betrayal too. His arm slowed, his shield sagged, his circle shrank. Blades found him the way vultures find heat, drawn, inevitable. One pierced, then another, until he was less a man than a bonfire collapsing inward. He fell, not like a king immortalized in tapestry, but like a problem finally solved by subtraction. They took his head, because heads travel farther than corpses. A body rots. A skull can cross borders. In Constantinople, they nailed his gaze to a stake in the marketplace, a prince reduced to spectacle. People came not to mourn, but to measure how long they dared to stare, how quickly they looked away. His death was not a funeral, it was punctuation. Who delivered him? Some say Ottoman blades. Some whisper Hungarian intrigue. Others accuse Wallachian boyars. Truth did not argue. It shrugged, and rumor finished the paragraph. It was not a duel, not even truly a battle. It was a vote taken in silence. Absence raised its hand and carried the day. The men who once shook at his command discovered the simplest kind of courage. Not being there when the killing blow landed. It was not steel that undid him. It was arithmetic, the slow addition of small betrayals, the subtraction of loyalty, the multiplication of fear, until even allies realized it was safer to abandon him. In the end, the terror he taught returned to him, not in the screaming dialect he had perfected, but in a quieter voice. Silence, absence, the sound of men stepping back instead of forward. And that silence killed him faster than any blade. Even in death, he was staged. Enemies understand that spectacle rules as effectively as steel. His head was displayed in the markets of Constantinople, where children pointed, merchants laughed too loudly, and strangers lingered just a moment too long. His body, stripped of its roar, was mocked into an exhibit. Author turned into footnote, architect turned into cautionary tale. But mockery is not mastery. For some in the crowd, laughter died in their throats. Even a severed head has gravity when it once commanded storms. Mothers pulled their children close, sensing that even broken, he had not entirely left. The lesson was meant to be clear. Monsters fall, tyrants bleed, empires survive. But some who stared into his empty sockets felt the opposite. They felt the air drop in temperature. They felt the winter he had carried in his soul, still alive in the square. His corpse did not rest. It lingered. But corpses rot, legends ferment, and Vlad's legend fermented into something darker than flesh could contain. Chroniclers, priests, and gossip mongers chewed on his story until fangs appeared. In whispered fireside tales, the Impaler became the undead. The prince, who had impaled thousands by day, was said to rise at night to drink their blood. Children learned his name before they learned their prayers. Mothers spoke it as a threat, emperors as a warning, strangers as entertainment. His brutality outlived him, but transfigured, mutated, until the man was barely visible beneath the myth. He did not become a vampire because of lies. He became one because truth alone could not carry the weight of him without changing shape. Thus, Dracula was born, not invented, but distilled. A second life, more profitable and more enduring than his first. In death, he found the immortality he had once tried to carve from the bodies of others. Centuries later, the shadow remains. Roads he once patrolled still feel uneasy to travelers who cannot explain why their pace quickens. Inns bolt one extra latch when the wind moans wrong. Kings, generals, and dictators study him in private, tracing the shape of his reign, pausing longest over the word impalement. They see not just cruelty, but a blueprint, fear as infrastructure, terror as law. And though they close the book, they never quite close the thought. People whisper Dracula and feel taller for surviving the sound. Then they blow out their candles slower, as if fire might steal by them one more breath. His true empire was never Wallachia. It was the imagination. He rules not in borders, but in the reflex of fear, and somewhere in the soil of his homeland, where wheat meets forest, the air still carries a metallic tang, not the smell of crops, the smell of iron, rot, and memory, the smell of Vlad. He turned punishment into architecture and terror into currency. For a time, the market boomed, but every currency devalues. The men who once paid him in obedience saved a coin for themselves, one decision, one delay, one refusal, and bought his ending. Betrayal is the quietest instrument. It makes no sound until the music stops. Vlad the Impaler proved that fear can build a throne. He also proved what it costs to sit on it. Remember him not as a monster apart from us, but as a mirror, a measure of what power wants when no one is brave enough to say no.
More stories waiting. Stories they tried to erase. Click and step into the next one. And if this tale gripped you, like, share, and subscribe. Every click keeps the fire burning, and every share makes sure the Empire never forgets. Like the story, hit subscribe, share it so the Empire remembers, and keep watching. The next reckoning is waiting.